Welcome everyone to the Purpose Hangtime podcast. It is your host Leon McFarlane and my co-host
Ricky Pie.
And today we have another external guest, more feminine energy to whet the appetite and more stories, more shooting the breeze in typical Purpose Hangtime fashion. So today I've got my good friend, confidant, Natalie, who is going to talk us through, plus give us a little bit of information regarding her ex and the realization of Knapps Relationship Theory realized. So before I go into what Knapps Relationship Theory is, Natalie, would you like to give a brief introduction to our audience?
Hello, everyone. My name's Natalie. I've been a long-time listener since the pilot episode of the Purpose Hangtime series, and I'm happy to share my experience with you all.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Nat, and it's a pleasure to have you on today's episode, despite all the technical difficulties it's taken for us to get here. But yes, we are here. So, Knapps Relationship Theory. So we are going to be talking about your relationship with your ex and when you knew it was time to just call it a day. And essentially, from our discussion back then, I think it was December time, 2022, after recorded our 6th episode. You can correct me if I am wrong, Ricky. Our 6th episode, which was based on Knapps Relationship Theory. Now, what's interesting about this episode is we did it in 2 parts. And it's probably the least listened to episode of our repertoire of 16 episodes so far. Now, why was
so much
that?
Theory,
was it,
too much theory.
Yeah, it was too much
theory.
psychology. We thought that we were, we had our PhDs and our doctorates in psychology, and we thought we could really be the historians when it came to it. But ultimately, that wasn't the direction we wanted to go down. But there was one avid listener by the name of Natalie, of course, our guest, who listened to it and was like, you know what, this relates to me. And I think that's what's important when it comes to resonating with an audience is, okay, the stories and information that we're portraying, does it relate to them or not? So without further ado, I'm going to go through Knapps Relationship Theory just very, very quickly, and then we're going to get down to the actual questions that we're going to go through for this interview, this candid interview. So Knapps Relationship Theory was devised by Mark Knapp in the 1970s, and it's a model that's widely used to understand the dynamics of interpersonal relationships. So main purpose of Purpose Hangtime, we talk about familial, we talk about the romantic, and we talk about the platonic relationships. How do they develop and how do they dissolve? And that is what Knapps Relationship Theory mainly focuses on. So if we think of it this way, 5 steps going up and 5 steps going down. The 5 steps going up when it comes to Knapps Relationship Theory is relationship development. So it starts off with the initiating. The first time you meet someone, you are mentally going through the idea of, you know what, is this a relationship that I want to go forward with? In terms of the societal norms, do we vibe? It's all that sort of thing initially. Then you get to the experimenting phase. You've already given out the number, or you've decided to really, really talk with this person, or you see them in the canteen often. The reason why I say canteen is because that alludes to something I'm going to go to a bit later. So it could be the canteen where you've met up and it's like, you know what, I really, really like this person. Let's intensify this relationship. So this is where you then there's an establishment of the mutual awareness of the relationship. And you then start to drop down the ground rules. Oh, this is what I like doing. This is what I have as a boundary when it comes to this relationship. The next step, because we're continuously intensifying, is the integrating. You then start to establish identity as a social unit. So this is where, let's say in a romantic relationship, you'll then start to say to friends and family, this is my other half, this is my partner, etc., etc. And now it's become socially known. And then you reach the peak of the stairs. So when you reach the landing, when it comes to relationship development, which is known as the bonding stage. And this is where you formally establish that relationship through a public ritual. And when I say public ritual, it's the case where you're now consolidated as a couple, or you're consolidated as friends, or you reach that peak in terms of where you are as a family. And this can always refer back to our older episodes. Shameless plugs out there when it comes to communication, when it comes to accountability, and all the other bits and pieces that we have spoken about on this podcast. So we're at the top of the stairs right now. What about when it comes to relationship dissolution? What happens when it comes to that? So 2 people are 2 different identities. So you've got the bonding, but then you've also got the differentiation. So this is where, let's say, for example, I like building computers, you like riding a bike and cycling. I don't like that. These are two separate things that we enjoy doing. And normally when it comes to a relationship, you kind of bounce around at the bonding and differentiating. But when it starts to come to the breakdown, this is where we start to go down the stairs. So the next step going down, circumscribing. You start to make that psychological distance by sharing less information and avoiding certain topics with your other half. We've all been there where you're like, you know what, we got some differences and I don't want to rock the boat a bit. Let me not say anything. And this is where you start to break down in terms of your relationship. The next step, which I am fully aware of, I've had it in terms of the divorce, in terms of all the other stories that we've heard of in here before, the stagnation. Avoiding the communication or talking about your partner's flaws. And we all have flaws, you know? So this is where things start to happen, disagreements, the big disagreements start to happen, and you just start to break down as a couple. And normally when you get to the stagnation and the next step, which is avoiding, there's not really a way of coming back. So the step after the stagnation is avoiding. And this is literally where you have that physical distance. So now it's no longer psychological, it's now physical. You no longer want to be around that person too much, or you try to make excuses to not be around that person. And then the final step, which is the terminating, where you've decided, you know what, it's time to put up the boundaries completely. I no longer want to be around this person. Remember, this is romantic, this is platonic, and this is also with the familial ties as well. And normally when you get to that part, you clarify the expectation of the future, whether you want to continue to have that person connected, but not connected in the same way. So to finalize all the steps of Knapps Relationship Theory, these steps normally go in a logical fashion, up, across, and down, but then you can spend a lot of time in individual steps as well. So shameless plug, I'll make sure that in the episode, we'll have that episode linked below. So with that, we're going to focus now on our guest, probably pointing in the wrong direction. So Nat, we're going to talk about the ex. Do you want him to be named or her to be named in any other particular fact, any other fashion, or do you want to just keep him as or her as the ex? Just to make sure you're comfortable with this. That's cool. So let's go with that. So the first question, how did you two meet?
So we met at my old workplace, and we had a shared restaurant canteen area. And it's all shared tables, and we happened to sit on the same table. And I spoke to him because he brought his lunch in from home, and he had one of those self-insulated bowls, and it was stuffed full with rice and beef and fresh lime and eggs, and it just looked so tasty. I thought, do I speak to him? Do I not? I really want to know what he's eating. Purely the focus was food. And I did, and we ended up chatting the lunch hour away, talking about travel and hobbies and things like that. And I guess, the friendship really started from that point.
So with that, you would say the main attraction factor, food. Obviously, the person brought in his bits and pieces. It looked like it was going to be a sumptuous lunch, and you're like, let me ask a few questions. So were there any other attraction factors when it came to this individual, and what were the green flags? What were the things that you really, really attuned to?
Well, I will say that when we did meet, I was not in the mental space to even fathom a relationship. I just wasn't in that zone at all. But he definitely won me over because he was an incredible gentleman. He was very polite, well spoken. He was very consistent, whether it's putting time aside for us to spend together or plan something ahead. So we kind of just continuously built off of this friendship that progressed into something more. And yeah, he was intelligent, he was funny, but I would say he had very good, strong values, and knew how to treat people, and that was all green flags for me.
Good stuff. So yeah, I know I can talk from my perspective, when it did come to your ex, he definitely was a gentleman. Like when I met him for the first time, great guy, good conversation, spoke about a few pretty interesting topics. Yeah, and literally, it definitely seemed like a good fit for you at that particular time. Even though, okay, I guess in terms of our friendship, we weren't at the level that we are today. So I guess the next question will be, where did it go wrong? Were there any creeping suspicions when it came to this individual? Because this sounds like a great origin story to begin with.
Sounds like a Hollywood romance, or the start of a Hollywood romance.
Very true. It did feel like that. And I would say initial doubts started to creep in because I guess quite early on, what happened naturally was that he met quite a lot of my close circle, my friends, my family. So he was exposed to my personal life, and he was well received, and that was nice. But I started to feel a separation because that wasn't reciprocated from his side, and really, actually, from quite early on, I was emotionally holding back, and that was a conscious decision because I was like, how much of myself do I how much of myself do I let be vulnerable in this relationship? Let me wait to see, if he's going to show me something more, or bring me into the fold. And that's not something I wanted to force. It's something that people need to do when they're ready. But for me, I think that took too long, and in many ways, I think that kind of stunted it from the beginning.
Did he give reasons why he wasn't ready to kind of bring you into his circle? Or
Yeah, I would say some of it, I guess, would be perhaps some cultural differences. He was from an Asian background, and I guess traditionally, um, you would introduce someone to your parents when you're kind of at marriage stage rather than we're dating phase, which is understandable. But I think for me, there was never a goal post of, when we date for 6 months, when we date for a year, perhaps this integration will happen. It was kind of one day, one day, one day. And I thought, well, that could be 1 year, that could be 6 years. I don't really know. So I didn't know where I stood in terms of that.
Yeah, I've got an extra question to that. Was there any? Were you transparent with where you wanted the relationship to go once you realized you wanted to be in a relationship? I know you said earlier you were not in the headspace to say, okay, this is where we should be.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no worries. So, in terms of the transparency of what the goal was to be, do you feel that you both were transparent about what you wanted from the relationship from the beginning?
Um, to be honest, I was going with the flow, as I wasn't expecting to be in a relationship. But I was happily going with the flow, and I think he had a strong view and was often verbalizing, "Oh, I see us progressing and just going further and further." But in actual terms of, I mean, that was kind of it. It was kind of, okay, I see
Yeah.
us progressing. We'll carry on as we are. So there was nothing kind of concrete or physical goals working towards. It was just, we are progressing together, and at some point, I guess we will go on to other things or do other things.
Yeah, you enjoyed each other's company, and essentially, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, Nat, my next question for you. Oh, you gonna say something? Nope. My next question for you is, yeah, go
Um, I was going to say that one thing to note was that within the first 5 months of our relationship, we were then hit with the COVID pandemic. So that did
on.
affect actually some aspects of that, because we couldn't meet, we couldn't integrate, couldn't socialize in normal ways. So that was
Yeah,
also a factor.
yeah. So added some extra strain
Hmm.
to what was already what wasn't consolidated, but it just made everything so much more difficult when it came to the normal parameters of what would be required for a relationship. So during that
Mhm.
time, how did you communicate with him? How did you still manage to try and meet up virtually or anything?
Uh, Only we didn't meet physically. Everything was virtual, so we had daily
Hmm.
FaceTimes, yeah, long conversations. We talk kind of all throughout the days, and that when we also did have the same schedules either.
Mm.
So that was a nice way for us to keep in touch.
Yeah, so it seems like you both did put in the work then. So no, that definitely sounds good to hear. So yeah, so with that, Natalie, obviously you're talking about work, and we're also talking about Knapp's relationship theory. What is your understanding of Knapp's relationship theory? And talk me
Well,
through that time where it really resonated with you.
well, prior to listening to that episode,
Mm.
I had no knowledge of Knapps relationship theory, and I remember the day I was listening to the podcast on my way to work, just enjoying it, and yeah, getting to grips with this new concept of how a relationship grows and then falls apart. And you were talking through the different stages, and then I kind of stopped in the middle of the street because I was like, oh. I'm kind of in a bit of a panic because I realized I was on the I guess on the fringes of the steps going down to the relationship falling down, because I realized I was probably at the avoidant stage, stagnation stage. Um, and it wasn't until that I'd heard someone else verbalize that I was like, hang on, this is what I'm doing right now. So that was kind of my first um, warning bell to tell me that
Yeah.
something isn't right here.
Yeah, no, it's great to know that when we search up a specific theory, don't do it as much now, but just knowing that there are definitely key nuggets of information that our audience do grasp from what we do say. Because there are some times where you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, is this the right topic to talk about?" And then, yeah, you get amazing responses such as this. So, yeah, no, thank you very much, Nat. So, I'm going to next talk about the turning point. So, and they're very interesting. I don't know how this even happened or how it manifested, but we both were in Mexico at the exact same time, the beginning of 2022, and it's quite crazy how that even down to more or less the same dates. It was your first holiday with this significant other, and I was out there. I think I just needed some headspace. I just needed a trip. I meant to be meeting my cousin out there as well, and it was like, Nat, how are you out here at the same? And I remember that particular time as well. We've been the first trip. You both seemed happy, but then there also seemed like there was a barrier of some sort. And I remember pointing to a specific picture. I know you remember that picture. Bless you again. And I remember saying, "There's a gap between you guys when there's a picture being taken with the two of you and you're a couple." So in Mexico, what did you find out about this significant other?
It was a trip where our differences were definitely highlighted, and I celebrate differences, but I think being in a relationship, you also have to overcome differences to
Hmm.
find a good, a happy medium for you both. And I did actually struggle because our personalities are quite different. I'm very like to go with the flow, go with the adventure of a holiday. Like let's get lost, let's just take the day as it comes. Whereas he was very structured and rigid and was like, we're going to do this at this time, that at that time. We're going to get this bus, not that bus, and we're going to get there at this time, and we're
Oh.
not going to be. And for me, I was like, oh no, let's go with the flow. So we kind of did wrestle with each other, because I guess we both had different ideas of, what a holiday
Mm.
looks like. Um, and yeah, I did feel frustrated some days, but
Yeah.
on the whole, we did have a good trip together.
Mhm.
on that trip, how did you kind of express your frustrations towards him? I mean, did you guys get into like mini arguments, or was it kind of like, needed some time separate from each other a little bit, or?
Yeah, I think I did have to verbalize and just have a few little outbursts because I think that was another thing with our communication. I don't think that he read physical cues, behavioral cues
Right.
well. So I think it quite often gets to a point where I literally have to tell you, I'm feeling this right now because you've just done that. And that was also something that for me was a barrier to overcome because I'm used to a lot of my close friends, family just picking up on small little cues. So yeah, we did have a few exchange words where we kind of agreed or came to a compromise on something. Yeah, we didn't spend any time apart to cool off or anything. It's all settled locally.
Yeah, so it's amicable. Yeah. How long was the trip? Out of interest.
The trip was just under 2 weeks. Just under 2 weeks.
Okay, so yeah, that's definitely quite a lot of time for you to really know what someone is like individually. So yeah, so would you then say that that trip was the saving grace for you to make a decision on what the future of that relationship was going to hold?
I don't think I
I
understand
know.
your question.
So what I'm asking is, do you think that it gave you all the knowledge you needed to know for where the relationship was going to go?
That's a good question. It didn't give me all the knowledge that I needed, but it confirmed a few, thoughts and feelings that I had prior. It highlighted, it magnified everything, especially when you're away together. And I thought, oh, this is what, you know, you kind of think about different situations. If we're like this on holiday, what's it going to be like if we, take those steps and actually move out together, or
Yeah.
go on another trip, or if we want to live abroad, how can I live like this? You kind of ask yourself these questions. So it definitely confirmed a few things, but there was nothing. I didn't come away from that holiday thinking like we need to break up. It was just a bit of a reality check,
Yeah.
I guess.
No, that makes plenty of sense because, yeah, when it comes to any sort of anything more than a week, you will see the person's bad habits. You would see the good things. You will see where you two could work as a team. And I think that as you stated quite well, this is where you get to understand, okay, can we work in sync? And are your habits are they tolerable enough for me to actually continue with this? Is it going to be a bugbear for the rest of the time that I'm with you? And I think this is where, yeah, we need to make decisions on whether we do want someone for a long period of time. And this could obviously, as I said to the audience before, this could also be utilized in terms of family as well. Plenty of cousins that you can go on holiday with, but if they have specific attributes that really put your guard up or make you feel unsafe, it then makes you think the second time, would I want to go on holiday with this person again? Yeah. So, yeah. And then on the topic of family, what did your family think of your ex?
They really enjoyed him. He was a lovely person. Could be quite silly, quite jokey, a bit quirky in his own way. I do think sometimes they they did find him a little strange in his own way, maybe because of the situational behavioral reading. But no, they both really enjoyed and liked his company.
Good stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
During this time,
how
go on, Rex.
important how important was to have the validation of your kind of your family and friends about this guy? How important was that to you?
I think it is massively important. I think it is also important to stay independent, to what you want, to whoever. I mean that generally, even if people are against certain choices. But I think actually, it's very important because these people are your echo chamber, and you kind of feel, even if they are disproving, it might be little comments or certain body language, that you're just aware that perhaps I'd rather maybe not my family member be associated with this person. So I think it is important in a lot of friendships and relationships that your circle do approve and get on board, but also important that they echo to you, as my circle did to me, and help me question, is this the right situation for me? As lovely as this person is, you're not your best you right now in it. And that's something that they also help me kind of reckon with and reconcile with.
Which is a great answer, because you essentially answered my next question as well about who was there for you as an emotional soundboard. But yeah, it's always important to get different sides of the story, get family members, friends. When it does come to any potential relationship or whilst in a relationship, listen to what their outlet is. Listen to what their comments are on your partner. Generally, if they are picking up a positive vibe, they will let you know. But then also in the same way, when there's a negative vibe, they will let you know as well, but probably it will be packaged in a different way.
And I totally agree. Especially when you're in a certain situation, and you're one of the involved parties in there, you may have kind of your blindfolds on, right? So you may not see exactly the full picture. Whereas if you have some external eyes or external ears, advising you, be like, well, you're in this moment now, and you're in the situation right now, but from the outside looking in, we can see more of the picture as well. So like you said, I think it's very important to have those echo chambers, which I think is a brilliant term, actually. I couldn't have phrased it better myself.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, Nat, the end. Thanks for sharing with us the little bits and pieces regarding your story with your ex, but when it came to the end of the relationship, when was enough? What, if you want to talk us through what that looked like?
Yeah, I think so that trip to Mexico, I was just thinking back on our timeline. So our relationship kind of lasted just under 12 months more from that point. And I guess that year was very tough for me. And I think some deciding factors was that I found, as supportive as he was in so many of his ways, he wasn't an emotional support for me, which was a very big thing, because he was the person I spoke to most. And I would sometimes feel quite isolated because I felt he couldn't understand or put himself in my shoes, or quite understand certain things that were going on in my life. And I felt that I needed that from a partner. So I found that kind of year tough, and I guess maybe that's one example where separation perhaps started, because maybe I wouldn't talk to him about my day because I wasn't getting any solace from it, any feeling any better, and things like that. And I think I started to have these, little microaggressions and frustrations. You mentioned communication earlier. Our communication styles were quite different. He would like to communicate very frequently every day, whereas for me, I'm more, let's kind of wind down and talk at the end of the day when we both got mental space and time to actually listen to one another, whereas he preferred to pop in and out. That would aggravate me because it was like a constant, loop, and I would do it because that's what he liked. So I was like, let me try and compromise. But then actually I would find myself being snappy and because my time and energy is being sucked in a way that is not good for me. But how it came to the end, I guess. Oh, yeah, I guess throughout that year, we just spent, well, I consciously kind of spent more time apart. I was focusing on some projects, some home renovation. So I realized I was kind of using that as an excuse to, I need some time to plan this. I need some time to do that. And I need alone
Yeah.
time to think, which my personality is quite like that anyway, but I was doing that even more so just to have more time to steal for myself. Um, and yeah, eventually it just felt like this isn't working because the interaction felt more bothersome for me, and I felt weighed down by the expectation.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess.
Did you kind of feel towards the end that his energy was coming that of more and more clingy in that aspect?
That's a good question. Um, I would I would agree to a certain extent because I think, sometimes when you're after something and you don't get it, so you kind of more aggressively
Yeah.
chase um chase something, and I guess I was being a bit more avoidant, and even more so, he wanted to communicate even more. So there was that element where it kind of did feel like he was chasing me to talk or to catch up or to do things and plan things, and I was just being evasive, not really knowing how to deal with what I was feeling, but then also feeling overwhelmed by the chasing. Um, yeah.
Do you feel with the way how he was in the relationship, it was due to lack of relationship experience?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Um, and I think prior to our relationship, which was 3.5 years, his longest relationship was about 8 to 9 months. Um, and I think in comparison, I'd been in longer relationships and I'd had time to, I guess, solidify who I am, not just by myself, but when I'm in a relationship and how I like to communicate. And he was very accommodating, which on one hand was nice, but on the other hand, it was also aggravating because just, if we had a conflict, he'd want to smooth over it, and I felt he would do these things because that's what you're meant to do when you have an argument. You're meant to reconcile. You're meant to come together and not argue. And sometimes, I kind of want to fight, or I need to, express myself. And he
Yeah.
wonder, no, no, we're not fighting. We're not doing that because that's not what people do in relationships. So I think he had this kind of one note of what you need to do,
Yeah.
a dilemma, what you should do to keep your partner happy. And that was another thing with communication. I think he felt like when you're in a relationship, you're meant to speak to your partner 5, 6, 7 times a day. But in reality, that doesn't work for everyone.
And it kind of comes back to when you had the trip in Mexico, right? Where you said he was very organized and he liked to plan everything, and it kind of sounds like he was just going through a mental checkbox in his mind. Okay, so in
Yeah.
order to diffuse his argument, I'm just gonna make sure tick this box, tick this box, tick this box. Whereas, like you said, then that you're a person that likes to kind of read the situation and kind of go with the flow. So yeah, I think he, just didn't get you from that aspect.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree, Ricky.
And it seemed like a checkbox rather than let me listen to what my partner actually wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think guys sometimes do this thing. And I'll say I've done this as well, where you try to
Me too.
fix a situation when the situation doesn't require fixing. It just requires you to just listen to your partner, hear what he or she has to say, and then leave it at that. And then they will come to you when they are ready.
Exactly.
And I think understanding that style, whether that's attachment style, we got an episode for that. Whether it's communication, we got an episode for that too. Or whether it's accountability, is one of those things where you really have to listen to your partner to really refine that connection. So yeah. So when it came to the dissolution, how was it emotionally? Were you distraught? Did you just end amicably and you were both happy with the end solution?
I wouldn't say it was amicable. It was more one-sided, and the decision came from me. For me, I think I'd worked through and wrestled with, you know, the idea of the end of the relationship for a long time, and I think I'd known it was the right decision for a long time, but it was hard to take that step, and I didn't want to make a decision that I would regret. But once I did make the decision, it was very freeing and easy for me because it was like a weight had been lifted. The expectations, someone else's expectations of you, that had been lifted, and I didn't realize how bogged down, like mentally and emotionally, that I was until I kind of just had space just to breathe.
Yeah.
So it was the right decision at the time, and because of that, it was easy to progress onwards.
Mhm. Mhm. So from that experience, what would you like looking forwards? If you had another relationship, what lessons from that experience would you take into this one?
I would definitely listen to myself more and fight for what feels right for me rather than aiming for a compromise, because some things you just shouldn't compromise on, like your core values or what you believe is important. I think that's where a lot of problems arise, is when people lessen themselves or ignore that certain part of themselves for the sake of someone else's emotions, and that's, I guess, when you're really in trouble, because you're never fully happy on the inside.
Yeah.
You're always kind of what's the word? Feeling like you've drawn the short straw in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say to have the confidence to kind of stand by what you want and listen to what your inner voice is saying.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that, Nat. Rick, do you have any extra questions? It's been a great episode.
So what does the future hold for you now, dating wise? Are you on any of the apps, or are you just taking a break from everything at the moment? Shed some light.
No apps, and yeah, just doing me.
Fair enough. And that's the thing. Refining connection with oneself is what is most important at the end of the day. And when one is ready for dating romantically and refining connection with others. So yeah. So ladies and gents, that is our episode. And we have gone through Knapps Relationship Theory very, very quickly. Yet again, we got the actual episode in our back catalogue. Nat has explained her great story regarding just knowing when the end is there, just knowing to be true to oneself when it comes to a relationship, and essentially what the warning signs are when it comes to it. And I think that was explained quite eloquently, which is great. And obviously, in true purpose Hangtime fashion, a quote is what we request from our guests. So Nat, what do you have for us today?
Today I have a quote from Joy Bell C, who is an author of various philosophical works, and I'll read her quote as follows. You will find that it is necessary to let things go, simply for the reason that they are heavy. So let them go. Let go of them. I tie no weights to my ankles.
Powerful, powerful quote. See, Rix, you know what I said last time about our guests killing us with quotes? That's a powerful one. That's a powerful one.
That's one of the most beautiful quotes I've ever heard, and here I am quoting Rocky, so...
And the thing is, it encompasses everything that we have spoken about today. So at that point, I'd like to thank our guest, Nat. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you.
It's been a great time in terms of really, really delving through, and I hope it has been cathartic for you. And Rix, obviously, great energy as per usual, coming in with the questions too. And on that note, Purpose Hangtime has finished with this episode. It has been great recording this one. And yeah, 2 guys and a lady, of course. 2 guys and a guest shooting the breeze.